Have you ever worried that scaling your business might make it lose its soul? Well, you're not alone. It's a common concern that as a business scales, the automation, the structure might strip away the personal touches that define its unique character. But what if you could scale and enhance your operations without compromising the qualities that make your business special? How do you ensure that automation enriches the human elements of your business rather than overshadowing them? Well, today we're diving into these questions with Ernesto Mandowsky, a fractional COO, founder of MDM, also known as Million Dollar Machine, and expert in business systems design. So if you're gearing up for growth and seeking smart ways to integrate effective automation, then this episode is going to be packed with the insights that you need, because Ernesto is not just going to share some theoretical knowledge, but real life stories of businesses that have successfully scaled whilst keeping the essence that makes them special throughout their growth. Welcome to De-Stress Your Business, the podcast where we show you how to get incredible results in your business without constant stress. I'm Alexis Kingsbury, a serial entrepreneur and founder at AirManual, and I'm joined by Ernesto Mandowsky. Welcome to the podcast, Ernesto.
Thanks, Alexis. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. I can't imagine that when you were at school learning the ropes of life that you thought, you know what I want to do? I want to be a fractional COO and business design expert. So how did that happen?
I actually started with a desire to get into hospitality. Really was fascinated with the way you can design an experience. Nice. And specifically, how could you throw a really amazing dinner party?
Doing that at scale, right? As well, like in a hotel area, you can't just do like, oh yeah, we've done 6 people one evening.
Yeah, when I was 18 years old, I threw a party to celebrate my graduation, and it wasn't 100 people of my grade. It was 2,000 people across 15 schools at a nightclub, and made $30,000 in cash in one night. So, that rush of energy was like, oh, wow, this is what I want. And when I went to college, I studied systems engineering, which actually point blank said, this is how you build machines. So I always wondered, how could you bring these two worlds together? And after 10 years of working in restaurants and startups and big companies, small companies, I basically created my own way of helping small businesses implement the automation so that they could provide a Michelin starred experience for their clients.
Nice. That's fantastic. And so as you began to then go into this area and start to work with clients, was there sort of a particular experience that you had that kind of really galvanized, like, oh yeah, this is why I do this. Like, this is the impact that I want to bring?
Yeah, when I was just starting in this journey, I went to a nightclub and I said, hey, how do you keep track of your VIPs? This wasn't just some shady nightclub. It was one of the top nightclubs in New York City.
Sure.
When they showed me that they had this paper that, these servers are signing papers in the middle of a loud, raging party, I said, no, there has to be a way to make this more effective. So that experience was really like, okay, I'm really going to change this person's life with, from my perspective, seemed like such a small tweak. And when you actually do that and you help people actually see what's happening in their business, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities and questions.
What was the impact then? So if you take that as an example, when you did make those changes, what's kind of the knock-on order of impact in terms of for that business, financially, operationally, personally?
Yeah, that was only a short project, so I can't speak to exact impact. But what happens in businesses today? Hotels are getting customers from online travel agencies, or we are getting our customers from third parties. And that prevents us from building that direct relationship with customers. If you look at social media now, like people follow you on Instagram, you don't have their emails. So Instagram, Facebook, they're all kind of like promoters of our brand, but they are owning the relationships. And so when business owners recognize that they can reclaim those relationships and have direct relationships with their customers, now you can communicate with them as much as possible. You can tailor your communication to what their needs are, and you're not, unfortunately, beholden to the algorithm and its mysterious ways. You now have full ownership and autonomy with your clients.
Nice. And, in De-Stress Your Business episodes of the past, we've talked about various aspects of systems building, whether it's the episode with Adrian Dorison or we did one with Isaac Perdomo at Opsa about, sort of going deep into automation and building of those. One of the things that when you're looking at systems design, when you're kind of designing out problems or designing in opportunities, I think one of the things that people worry about is how you have that mix with the human side of it, how you keep what's special. So for example, with the nightclub with the VIPs, it's like, okay, so we start adding the systems, but does that lose some of that human touch? Perhaps they like the fact that the server's got the piece of paper and has this conversation and whatever. And I know that, like, you've written a book, New Bee, that's new bee as in like the thing that gives honey, based on your experience of making honey. But I know that for you, when you're looking at systems design and when you're thinking about these sort of things, your philosophy to implementing automation in businesses is a bit different to how people might expect. Can you kind of speak to that a bit?
Yeah, well, earlier when we hit the record button, we were talking about like why you started AirManual. You want to give people a renewed sense of freedom. You want to give them back hours of their time. And so when you ask, people maybe are feeling afraid of, maybe becoming like a robot because of all these automations, you can ask people and prompt them and say, hey, like, if this used to take you 15 hours of time each week, and now you have a robot following up with all of your leads in the same consistent way, what could you now do with these 15 hours of time? Is it spend time with a loved one? Is it baking challah bread? Is it reading? Is it doing CrossFit? Like, what is it that you want to do? And I think as long as you can remind people that implementing automation actually unlocks more humanity in your life, people get excited by that. People don't ever even think about like what it unlocks for them. And so their ego is telling them like, oh, it's going to, whatever the ego is coming up, that's what they think it is.
Sure. And I think particularly people worry about, if they've built a business that's, where customer experience is very important, like, talking about the nightclub example, the dinner party examples, like, the experience is a very personal one. It's, there might be a lot of talk about the vibe. It's not just, oh yeah, you can come into a nightclub and as long as there's music on and there's a variety of drinks, good nights will ensue. Although, I like to think that it doesn't matter where I go, we can have a good night. But that's not always the case. And it does, there's a lot that matters. So for people who are worried that, but the more I automate, the more I put structure, that's another one I hear a lot, I don't want too much structure in my business because, I like freedom and I like, making sure that it's all about the customer and it's got to be, high touch and all these sorts of things. What's your reaction to that?
I think a lot of people use it's all about the customer as a story to justify people pleasing. And I think, again, you cannot put the emergency mask on in the airplane. God forbid you're experiencing an emergency. You can't put it on someone else if your mask isn't on. And if you're doing everything to justify an amazing customer experience, that just means you're sacrificing your own personal life. And I think most entrepreneurs, they go into business because they want some sort of freedom and purpose. But because they're coming from these crazy corporate environments where everything is about the customer, they're kind of keeping that story going. They don't realize that they can actually take control of their own autonomy and design structure around their personal desires. And it's because they skip this step that they immediately think, oh, structure equals my old life as a corporate. But it doesn't necessarily mean that.
No, indeed. Perhaps you could share an example of perhaps working with a client where you kind of feel like they put in the structure and they put in the automations and so on. Sure. And yet, if anything, increased the magic, the vibe, the interaction, the value for the customer, like that actually went up by putting that structure and so on in.
Yeah, totally. I have a coach that I worked with that when we started working together, he was working with 4 clients, classic coaching package. You have a couple of sessions, whether it's 6 sessions or 12 sessions or 15 sessions. Everyone does a little bit differently. What we did was we took the knowledge that was in his head and we turned it into a video course so that when you are actually in the session with the client, you're talking about what's coming up versus me teaching Alexis all these concepts and tools and automate. You're not retaining anything because you're dealing with the stresses of the moment. So because we were able to take that knowledge, turn it into a course, not only could he go from 6 clients to 15 clients, but he could actually be a lot more present with the person that was in front of them. And in between the sessions, they could watch the videos, understand his perspective, and do some guided exercises that are all just a lot more present whenever the client wants to do that work. But when we are together, when you are with your client or your provider, you're just dealing with whatever it is that is coming up. Whether you're a coach, whether you're a marketing agency, whether you are a mastermind community, you are dealing with what's organic in the moment. And a lot of that can happen if you don't have a set of tools and processes and team members around you that are supporting that moment.
Nice. I really like that. Yeah, it makes me think. So I've got as one of my clients a large accountancy practice where, in theory, like best practice is that they would be doing more interaction with clients, more value add, more focus on, what are your goals, what are you looking to achieve, essentially advisory, which is often high impact stuff. But they're spending so much time on just doing the doing because of a lack of systemization, structure, documented process, automation, that as a result is like it's enough just to keep up. And I think that, and yet in the past, I think they're not the case now, hence working with them, but like in the past they'd have held back from even exploring those sorts of those things and putting that structure because of that concern around reducing the value or whatever. So
Sure.
it's interesting, as you say, it allows you to be more in the moment, be more focused on that, which is really nice. Are there any examples where you've seen that automation, and structure or whatever is kind of a double-edged sword, and that actually there's been disadvantages to putting it in? And if so, what were they? And did you kind of help them scale it back, change it? Like, how did you iterate to make sure that it ended up being the right answer?
Yeah, sometimes, not everything can and should be automated. It's difficult. Automation usually, it's when you have a predictable, consistent set of rules that you follow. So yesterday I had a call with a client. It was actually the operator of this coaching client that I mentioned. He hired a VA. That person is now helping him continue to free up his time. And now this VA is asking the questions, well, hey, how can I automate the next check-in? As you are reaching out to people, as you're providing high-level advisory services, I teach that everyone should have a next date. Like, when is the next time to check in again? 1 week, 1 month, 1 quarter, a year, you never know. And she was asking like, oh, how can I set up automation to like automate this process? And I said, honestly, you can't really automate because Alexis has a different preference than Ernesto and John and Jessica. Maybe one wants to check in tomorrow, the next one wants to check in, in a week, and the next one wants to check in a month. So in that case, like, you don't necessarily automate the follow-up, but you have to really ask yourself. And this is why it's important to work with other sources of inspiration and information. Sometimes it's a software, sometimes it's a business coach, sometimes it's a mastermind community, because these new sources of information are what challenge your status quo and what invite you to consider changing.
When you're working with clients, like, how do you identify where they should start with and what they should focus on putting structure in and automation? Because one of the things that I often see is that it's very easy for the leaders to become disconnected from some of the day-to-day, particularly as they grow big, and so it's difficult for them to see where some of the pain is. And it's easy for the employees to kind of be in a situation where they go, well, it's not that bad, I don't mind doing it. And so they're not the ones that are going to highlight, oh, actually this should be automated. They might even be fearful that making it efficient will lose their job, or they might think that it can't be automated or whatever. How do you kind of unpick that and get that transparency in the business to identify where first needs that attention?
I can't speak to the larger businesses because the majority of my clients are between 150K to 500K. So typically 1 to 3 person businesses. But I usually teach people to just start with understanding what is the core offering, what is the transformation that you provide, listing out the steps. And as you list out those steps, it's you can look at something. I mean, a group of people can look at that same checklist and say, oh, in this point we can automate, in this point we can automate, in this point we cannot automate. And you're just looking at that shared document. I did participate in larger companies, and I was often the person driving digital transformation. And I definitely had many conflicts where I would bring in a best practice, but the 75-year-old owner of the business who built the business from the ground up, who not taking anything away from that, but the perspective was that, hey, I built this from the ground up. You don't know anything. At some point, that human, that 25-year-old or 30-year-old young person can make a decision. Am I going to either you put up with it, the resistance? Sorry, expression is put up or shut up, or either you shut up and accept that's the status quo, or you leave and you find an organization that respects you. The worst thing for any bigger business, which it sounds like you work for a bit of larger organizations that I do, is that you have this group of employees that are disconnected and they don't feel safe to say anything because the leaders aren't even going to listen. And that's just, writing on the wall for other issues that maybe neither of us are paid to solve.
Interesting. And I would, a couple of things come up for me. So, one phrase that I'll sometimes use is talking about, when it comes to employees, if you've got an issue with a particular individual in the team, like either help to change that employee or change that employee.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you've got an equivalent there, which is, and from the employee's perspective, particularly when they're trying to help the business to improve, it's like either they can change their employer or they can change their employer.
Change their employer. Yeah, exactly.
And it's kind of a similar thing. I think it's interesting, when you talk about your focus on small businesses, I think that, certainly in my own experience, building my businesses in general, I feel like compared to most businesses, we've put in structures, automations earlier than most. And so typically when we've got to 3-4 people, we were kind of really putting that in. But it's interesting because I know a lot of small businesses, or even I was talking to a consultant earlier today who essentially is sort of affiliate of ours and sends customers our way. And they were saying, oh, well, actually a lot of my customers are really small, sort of 2-3 people. They're looking to add people, but it's like, at what point do they start to put the structure and the automations in? What's your view on that? Because given that that's who you're working with, like, is there a point that's too early, and when is that? Like, when would you look for that structure to start to be put in?
I think the I'll do it when I'm big enough story is the worst objection any lead can live by. Because whatever you build now at 150K, when you get to 600K, it's probably going to break.
Yeah.
It will break. But when you're at 600K and you build automations and you get to 1.2 million, it's going to break again.
So true.
And it's going to keep breaking, but that's evolution. It's like the stock market curve. Like, it goes up and then it drops down like massively. But then when it goes up again, it goes higher to where it previously was. And that's just nature. So people have to be comfortable with that idea. Like, hey, I'm just starting out as a business. I'm going to build out some automations. Maybe in 6 months, I'm going to rebuild. But when you rebuild, it's going to be a lot faster of a rebuild versus I'm not going to touch anything from 0 to 1 million. But then when you're at 1 million, you can't be present. You have to invest $100,000 in bringing a surgeon to come in and build things. Instead, you could just slowly build as you grow. You don't need to, make that phone call like, oh my God, I need someone now. You could feel a lot more peaceful as you're building and growing and building and growing.
I love that. And I think it also points to an experience that I've had of you kind of go round the business. So perhaps you'll say, oh, I haven't got enough customers coming in, and that's because I haven't got enough, leads and opportunities. So I'm not even getting conversations that could turn to customers. And so then you kind of work on that area and you work out, oh yeah, well, if I, post on social media in this way, or if I attend events in this way, and you start doing that. And if you're smart, you then create the structure around that, right? Whether it's the
Exactly.
automations that mean that you can do
Exactly.
that, that you can show up to an event and it's very easy to capture people's details and you don't end up with a week's worth of follow-up, or whether it's, getting social media done by a more junior member of the team who can use a particular process to
Mm-hmm.
kind of do it, or automation for following people and sending a message. Like, you set that up and now you'll have a new problem, because a new problem will
Mm-hmm.
be, oh no, now I have loads of conversations and I need to manage that. And so then you work on that. And then you go, now I've got loads of customers that need to serve, and you work on that. And eventually you get to a point where you go, oh, now I need more customers. And you loop back round. And I think you're exactly right. Like, it breaks. Like, you get to this point and, let's say in that example, you kind of get back and you go, yeah, the problem is that before, when we attended the events, no one had heard of us. So we could just talk to anyone. And now we're going to events, most of them have heard of us, which means that most of the conversations we have are not going to turn into potential sales or whatever. So that needs to change. And so then you look at, okay, so, are we asking for referrals or partnerships or amplification, and going back right around and repeating that cycle. And I think I love the fact that you're basically saying, look, whatever you do, it is going to break, but by doing each of those things and moving around and taking it piecemeal, you get there, and you keep on coming back, and it's quicker each time, and you can take it to another level. It reminds me of a conversation that we had essentially in the green room, where we're talking about the switch between, like, is it helpful to a business to kind of give them, hey, here's 200 processes or 200 automations just
Mm-hmm.
built for you in your business? And the answer is like, actually not. It's a bit overwhelming and you're not going to be able to use them out the box. What you really need to do is go around each of them and set them up and go through that process so that you can get to this new level. Are there any examples, like, of clients that you've worked with, perhaps that kind of makes you think of, where you've kind of gone through each of those areas, like squeezing the toothpaste along the tube, and then finally
Yeah.
it's like, oh my God, we're getting all these results?
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily marketing, sales, CX. When clients actually start working with us, we always put them through the same 3-month accelerator.
Nice, yeah.
And in those 12 weeks, we go through 6 modules, which starts with goal setting, because it always starts with the vision and the focus. Then it goes to people, which is who in my ecosystem can help me achieve my goals faster. Then when you run out of partners to help you out, it's projects. What work needs to be done? What are the tasks? What are the timelines? What are the dates? Who's responsible? How are we now sharing the message, sharing the wins from the work that we did, from our collaborations with our partners? How are we getting that awareness into the world? And after you're doing those first 4 steps, whether it's goals and marketing, goals and sales, goals and whatever, you probably have a lot of activity. You have a lot of things happening in the business. So instead of putting in more hours, it's okay, how do we get smarter about working? So the 5th module is playbooks, which is most closely similar with AirManual, and like getting just very clear on how things operate, because that sets the foundation for training and for automation. And then the last one is planning. Planning is the daily, the weekly, the monthly, the quarterly cycles that every business, regardless of industry, regardless of growth stage, every business must have some sort of a daily stand-up, a weekly review, a monthly analysis, a quarterly strategy session. And so we teach people, and we focus on these 6 pillars, because regardless of what team you're on, like, these are the 6 pillars that every team in any business operates. And it's this agility that people can develop with respect to, like, digital agility. We're not getting overwhelmed by your task list and your project list and your emails. And, like, because the building a business is overwhelming, you're creating from scratch. And so when you have all this noise, all these signals coming at you, it's like, okay, how do you filter through everything? You take them through your top 3 priorities. Then, is this signal, like, related to a person that maybe I could share with someone else? Or is this related to a project that I'm working on? Like, is it related to something in my immediate space? If yes, hell yeah. If no, see you later. and you just keep focusing on your priorities, on your projects. Because as you said, like when you go around the circle, when you go around your teams, you have to, rebuild sales or rebuild marketing. And so I say every quarter, when you go through this cycle of setting goals, new quarter, new priorities. If you didn't finish the priorities, maybe you misplanned, maybe you tried to do a year-long goal in 12 weeks, but it comes down to estimating your focus and estimating how long it's going to take you, and think in these 12-week quarters, because that's going to give you the most agility.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And thank you for taking us through that kind of journey, because I think that a lot of those things you've described I've implemented in my businesses and have found it transformational. Like thinking about that last one, which I know in the book, like Scaling Up by Werner Harnisch.
Yeah,
She's talked about like meeting rhythm, right? It's like, what's the pattern in your business? What's the structure in your business for, the stand-ups, the reviews and so on. But it's easy to overlook. And I know so many business owners that say, I can't imagine getting any work done if I'm having all these meetings. And actually it's the realization that it comes from putting this in where you go, oh, how did we get any work done without these meetings? Because of course, by not having the rhythm means that you field hundreds of micro questions and frustrations around the fact that no one else seems to know what the vision is and what the plan is and what the big projects are, despite the fact that you feel that you've told people 100 times. It's like, well, you have told them 100 times, but you've told 100 like different people where you've had 100 different micro conversations, rather than having like one state of the company presentation in which you've told everyone, here's where we've been, here's where we're at, here's where we're going, this is what you can expect from us, let's go. And I think that's really smart that, going through that journey, and I think the order that you share is really relevant and important as well, which I really, really like. One things that, I kind of teed up this episode talking about how, a lot of people fear the structure, the automations and so on. And, we've just talked there about like the rhythm and the meetings and playbooks and things like that. Like they worry that the business loses its soul, it loses its magic. And I remember actually I spoke at an event where one of the other speakers, it almost felt awkward. One of the speakers, great guy called Simon, who had built and sold a business for nine figure exit, right? So 100 million plus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Smart guy, clearly incredibly successful, and I like him a lot. But what one of the parting things that he said as part of his session was like, whatever you do, don't, essentially lose the magic through structure and so on. And I thought, oh my God, particularly because I was on later on that day to talk about why you need to structure in your business and so on. And I ended up referencing it, it was all fine, etc. But I'm interested in hit us hard with dealing with that, because that's the worry. Like this is a really successful business owner saying, don't lose the soul, don't lose the magic of your business by going down this structure route and whatever. And yet the reality is, when I've now spent more time with the guy, like I know all the structures in the business. I know the structures that his managers have put in the business that dealt with all the issues that he created and so on. How do you really deal with that challenge of, I don't want to lose the soul of my business?
The reticular activating system is a part of your brain that is responsible for helping you identify whatever thought is in your mind. And these people that are coming to you saying, I don't want to lose the structure, I don't want to lose the structure, they're just so focused on that fear, on that anxiety, on that worry. I have clients who've come to me and say, oh, this is going to be really hard. It's really going to be pulling teeth from the team to learn AirManual or to learn Notion or to whatever tool, right? It doesn't matter about your tool, my tool, but it's that belief that's keeping them in that reality. And I go back to what I said earlier. When you ask that person, what are you going to do with those 15 hours of free time? And people see you doing that. They when the CEO is the embodiment of what the team should be doing, that CEO can be a role model. And everyone should, and I hate using should, but everyone deserves weekends without answering emails. 6 p.m. to 9 a.m. free, allowed to enjoy themselves. If people focus on exemplifying that and keeping the humanity in their own private lives because they have been able to figure out the 9 to 6 part, then I think people would be curious to, Instead of asking like, oh, it's going to be like terrible, whatever. Okay, how can we make this work? How can we make this work such that from 6 to 9 a.m. I can enjoy my life? And that's a whole new conversation.
It is, and given the context of this podcast, de-stress your business, and what people have heard me talk about work-life balance and taking big holidays and all those things, of course, there's a whole level of that I agree with. I just want to check something though, because the way that you've described it there makes it sound like the soul of your business might be an acceptable casualty in getting what you've just described, the time off, the not having to eat, answer emails, and so on. Do you see it as actually you will lose the soul of the business, but what you get is a better return? Or do you see that actually you don't lose the soul of the business, and if so, why?
You don't lose the soul of the business, but people have to be intentional about actually like keeping the soul in the business, not intentional about we're going to lose the soul. Like, change the focus. The business will maintain its soul, and we're going to free up a shit ton of time. But that's not what our mind is programmed by default. It's in this fear state, like, oh my God, the change, it's gonna, we're gonna lose the soul and we're gonna become a machine, and it's all head trash.
Yeah, and what you focus on, you get. So I think the risk is that if you approach structure, and I've seen business leaders approach structure, automation, etc., with such a focus on, oh my God, we just need to be efficient and reduce costs, the risk is that you lose that soul, you lose the other side of it, and so on. Whereas I always look at it and say, no, you build that in. Like I liked how you just described it there, where it's like essentially you design in the soul. Like if anything, this is your opportunity to preserve the soul, because as you grow, the risk is that it gets diluted, and the magic that the business owner brings to every interaction they have with clients, that's easy to lose as you add to your team and grow the business. Unless you have the structure, the training,
to reinforce it,
etc. Exactly, to reinforce it and keep it going in the business. And I think so. I'm glad that you don't see it as just an acceptable casualty, and instead see it as something that you can, if anything, you can increase, right? And you know this more than most with the types of clients that you work with, and from your background on the hospitality side, where you can't lose that stuff, otherwise you will end up with empty rooms. That's cool. Excellent. Well, unfortunately, we're running short on time, but I have got some quick fire questions for you.
Let's hit them.
I may.
I will snap them back.
Brilliant. So 1 sentence answers, and I have to do my best not to then ask follow-up questions, because I'm so tempted always, and you can hear it. Like you can hear it in me. What one thing causes most stress for you?
For me, not completing my 75 hard daily activities.
Nice. I've stopped myself. What's the most important system to get right in a business?
Communication with your spouse.
If you had to choose between having like an awesome team but average systems and structure, or average team but awesome systems and structure, what would you choose?
Awesome team. All day.
What book or podcast has been most pivotal for you in changing your life for the better?
Reinventing Organizations by Frederick Laloux.
And what's the one thing you would want business leaders to take from this episode?
Find 5 hours in your week to work on your business.
Love it. Fantastic. Well, we'll make sure that we link to your LinkedIn profile on social media so that people can find you, Ernesto, because I'm sure that people will want to continue learning from you. I know that you share regularly on social media with your lessons, and I've seen you do videos on the sort of tactics of how you do things. So we'll make sure we share a link to that. Any other links that we should make sure we include in the show notes?
No, we'll just grab a link to my website. People can reach out and take it from there.
Fantastic. Right. So we'll have a link to the website and link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. But otherwise, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I really, really appreciate it. But to everyone else, until next time, have fun.